Yeah, I agree with you. Everybody wants a supercar, especially those of us that grew up lusting after the wildest Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and even McLarens. You know, with those billionaire doors. But the game has changed, and the latest era of supercars is very different from what it used to be. That's because performance is the name of the game, and the current crop can outperform their predecessors in pretty much every single category. But one thing has changed: value. While the depreciation valley on supercars is still a very real thing, there are some supercars out there that you should just wait for, because they're gonna plummet in value very soon. And I know you're asking, what's the depreciation valley? Well, it's a very interesting concept. Let me show you. So let's take this 2013 Gallardo, for example, that brand new was roughly $220,000. And essentially this supercar starts high and then it immediately starts to fall off of a cliff. And after the first year ownership, you've already lost $30,000. And then over the next few years, it keeps going down and down and down and down and down until you hit the bottom. And they flatline a little bit, and then they become more desirable because build numbers are low and fewer examples remain. And then they start to go up in value. And that's the magic and how you can own a supercar and make money driving it. And if you want to learn more about that, well, that's why I built the Ideal Car Strategies. So you could buy a car like a pro. Because the list that we put together today is the exact opposite of that. These supercars are absolutely tanking in value, but in a couple of years, they're gonna be great buys. So what cars are depreciating faster than a stock market crash? Well, I'm about to tell you. Let's go. Okay, this is one of my favorite cars ever. It's the Mercedes AMG GT, and it's the replacement for the gull-wing door SLS AMG, which is also one of my favorite cars. Now, the AMG GT went on sale in 2016, and Mercedes decided to give us a bunch of different models. So many that it's kind of hard to keep track. But a couple of the key ones are the entry-level AMG GT, which is pretty civil but still in your face cool. And then you got the monster, the track-annihilating AMG GT-R, which you shouldn't mistake with a Nissan GT-R. And then of course, there's a couple other models just sprinkled in between. This is the brand's flagship coupe, and it gets a 4-liter twin turbski V8. And that motor is pumping out anywhere from 429 to 630 blistering horsepower, depending on the model, of course. And no matter which flavor you pick, you get the gorgeous Grand Tourer styling. And like other AMG performance models, the GT comes in both coupe and roadster. And not only does this thing drive really well, that symphony that it pumps out of those two big holes in the back is one hell of a sonata. And remember, we're talking about high-powered supercars here, and so they're actually pretty reliable. And the AMG GT has already fallen off a cliff. Well, depreciation cliff, that is. And you can find decent examples online for half the original MSRP. Yes, a well-kept AMG GT or GTS can be had for roughly 75,000 bucks, and that's without looking too hard. And if you want the creme de la creme, well, you could find one for under 100 grand, which, yes, is 6 figures and it's not cheap. But when you consider that these things go for over $160,000 brand new, that's one hell of an ideal bargain. Okay, maybe not an absolute bargain, but if you have the budget to spend that kind of money, it's way cheaper than buying one brand new and losing all that money on our friend depreciation. Although, with all that being said, they haven't stopped dropping yet, unlike that Gallardo I showed you. So it might not be the perfect time to buy. And that's partly due to the fact that they're still in production and they're virtually unchanged, as well as Mercedes made quite a few of them, so they're not really all that rare. And so I gotta say that the AMG GT is, well, it's an excellent value and not a boring car by any means. And out of all the models, it's probably the most depreciation proof. So not only is it a legit choice, but it's a smart one. And so in the description, I link to my favorites of each of these models using AutoTEMPEST so you can see for yourself. And let me know down in the comments which one is your fave. Because although the AMG GT is a supercar, it's still a Mercedes, which is kind of pedestrian if you ask me. Especially when compared to something associated with elegance, style, and Bond, James Bond. And the Aston Martin DB11 has a license to kill you on its horrifying depreciation. And why the Aston Martin DB11 made it on this list is because if automatic examples of the DB9 and the Vantage produced from 2004 to 15 are any indication at all, the DB11 is about to become downright affordable. I never thought I'd say that. But the key here is that there is no manual 6-speed available. And if you want to save the manuals, go check out our limited edition Ideal T up here, because that's the only manual you'll have driving a DB11. See, there's a lot of supercars out there that will bottom out their depreciation at a pretty high number because they have manual transmissions. And then you get these more standard issue supercars with those boring old automatics, and those are the ones that keep going down in value. The DB11 came with either a V8 or a V12. And this thing absolutely stirs the soul because you get 503 horsepower out of that 4-liter V8, or if you opt for the naturally aspirated V12, 630 horses, baby. And that's coupled with the absolutely insane Aston Martin styling. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that this thing was pushing $300,000 when it came fully loaded. And today, you can find a few examples in the low 6 figures. And they're not dropping yet. Just watch over the next few years as these DB11s continue to tank. But man, they are so beautiful. But I can tell, Aston Martin isn't really for you. And you're looking to fly under the radar while killing it on the track. And you want something that doesn't cost an arm and a leg to repair. And it's pretty reliable. And its name is Godzilla. Well, the original R32 GT-R is Godzilla, but asterisk. Because the Nissan GT-R is another example of excellent depreciation. And as the values drop, it becomes more accessible for more people. So specifically, the tuner crowd will find more and more ways to just bring this thing up to 11. And new, with a sticker of over $100,000, this thing is kind of the bargain of the century, you'd think. I mean, performance for dollar, there isn't really much out there that can compete with it. But it's been around forever. Yeah, for over a decade. And they really haven't done all that much to it. And I can hear the keyboard warriors already saying, oh, there's been so many significant updates. Yes, there has, but let's face it, it's just an old car now. And $40,000 to $50,000 will buy you a decent example. And it's pretty much the same damn car as the brand new one. Now, let's get to the heartbeat of the matter because this thing is pretty much legendary. You have a twin turbski V6 that is prone to an immense amount of turbo lag. But the fact that there is such a huge aftermarket for these cars, it's actually not that tough to get this thing close to or past the 1,000 horsepower mark, which when you're pushing out 4 figures, then you're taking pretty much everything to dinner to Gapplebee's. And then you're washing it down with Gap Daniels. Maybe that's what the G in GTR stands for, Gap. Anyway, there is no denying that this thing takes modifications well. And so yes, there are those enthusiasts out there that want to keep it stock. Well, those guys are pretty much out of luck with the R35 GT-R because the GT-R just doesn't really hold its value and they tend to depreciate heavily in the first few years. But if you're not the kind of driver that attacks the track on the weekend and cares more about the sound and raw performance, the next one is probably the perfect one for you because it's the modern British icon that really does attract a lot of positive attention. The Jaguar F-Type, man, it is a total thing of beauty. And even though a new one was just released, yes, it's essentially a glorified facelift of the model that they sold in 2013. And that isn't actually really a bad thing because, man, these things look absolutely incredible. Just look at that thing. I mean, I wouldn't kick it out of bed. And that's probably because of those beautifully sculpted lines from iconic designer Ian Callum. Every time I see an F-Type, I think it costs like 4 times as much as it actually does. And yes, they have the blown V6 and the V8s, but my favorite is that SVR, the fire-breathing 575 horsepower that sounds absolutely orgasmic. And this thing is the whole meal deal. Not only does it look the part, the Jag sounds like a spawn of Satan with an exhaust note that can send chills down your spine. Whew, I got some goose pimples. And this is stuff that I would expect from a car that costs twice or 3 times as much. Because brand new, you can get an F-Type for just under $100,000 and it's pretty well equipped. However, if you're shopping the used market, yeah, you're in luck. Because just like pretty much every other Jaguar that's ever graced this planet, our friend Depreciation has not been very kind to the F-Type. Because early examples have already dropped below the $30,000 mark. And if you look hard, like really hard, you might even be able to find the supercharged V6 with the slick ZF 6-speed manual in that price range. And I'm gonna be one jealous dude if you get that, because you get a modern British roadster with a wicked exhaust note, a supercharged engine, and a manual transmission. But I can see you, Joe, in the back. Fuel-thirsty supercharged engines aren't really your thing. And I don't blame you. Well, I kinda do, but not today. Because you're the kind of person that prefers something with a sharp interior and the most modern aesthetic look possible. And you might be a little bit shallow, so you need some billionaire doors. Well, BMW is there for you. And yes, I agree with you, calling the BMW i8 a supercar is quite the stretch. But hold on, because guess what? It looks the part. And when the i8 came out in 2014, it was one of those cars that got attention everywhere it went. And still today, it still does. And it might be that outer space look, or those laser LED lights, or maybe even that BMW badge. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but for some reason, this is the type of car that makes even non-car people stare. And that's a good thing, because the i8 doesn't have any crazy V8 or V12. In actuality, it's got a little 3-cylinder scooter motor in it. And that thing's paired to an electric motor. And so you would call it a plug-in hybrid. And while it does drive pretty well, it's definitely no more dramatic or wild to drive than, say, a 4 Series. And if you think things are more fun topless, it does come as a roadster as well as a coupe. And since it is a plug-in hybrid system, you can go 20 miles just on the electric power. The only problem is that a Prius will roast you because it can do 4 times as much as your i8. But you don't buy an i8 to run on electric. You buy it to show up in style. And it did cost a lot of brand new, about $150,000 to do just that. But it's fallen a victim to the curve because it's a prime example of early technology going obsolete over time. But hey, I think it looks way better than the brand new M3 or M4. Anywho, let's take a visit back to Great Britain, where some of the most memorable cars of all time are born. Specifically Bentley, which is no stranger to depreciation, and the Continental GT is one of the most timeless cars ever. Yes, Bentley's Continental GT has had a very good run, and it's been around in various different forms since the mid-2000s. And every time I see one, I say, it's a real stunner, and it has the go-to-go with its show. Yes, the power plant for the Continental GT comes with 2 different flavors. You get the V8 and the V12, and both of them are boosted. And as of late, share a ton of componentry with the latest from Audi. And yes, the new ones are quite spendy, where with options, you can easily pass the $200,000 mark. But early examples from over a decade ago are starting to float at the bottom of the barrel. Yes, some are transacting for under $20,000 in some cases. That's less than 10% of the actual MSRP, which is insane. And an incredible price to pay for a twin Turbski V12 monster with a flying B on the hood. Now, I do have to admit that newer Conti GTs are a lot better than they used to be. And they're actually quite a bit more reliable as well. But again, as we learned with the i8, as tech moves forward, these things aren't really holding their value either. And while the used prices are dropping fast, these cars will continue to offer an element of style that few other cars today offer. And the Continental really does take advantage of these classic traditional aesthetics that goes after a very specific clientele. Or you're just an aspiring young professional, or an aspiring YouTube presenter like myself. You really won't look out of place in a Continental GT. And depreciation can be an absolute wonderful thing if you know what you're getting into. But it's important to be smart about it, because most cars with semi-exotic or exotic badges have a value floor that they won't go past. And as you saw in the beginning, that 2013 Gallardo will probably never go below what it hit earlier this year. And all these cars, some sooner than others, will hit that depreciation valley and start to go up in value as you drive it. Just remember, while the idea of getting into what was once a 6-figure luxury or supercar at a fraction of that might be exciting, it's always important to do your research. And while you're subscribed to this channel, and if you're not, go hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. YouTube as a whole is a wealth of information, and it will typically outline all the issues on all these different cars and teach you how to fix them if something does break. And if you have the money and you want to get a new toy, well, I've linked to my favorites down in the description. So what do you think? Have you ever bought a depreciated supercar or luxury car? What's next for your garage? Let us know down below. And also keep living the ideal lifestyle.